calling this meeting of the Academic Senate of Santa Barbara City College on December 1st to order. The time is now 3:03 p.m. I do know of at least one absence, Jess Estrada, and I also know that our Vice President, Ana Garcia, may be joining us late and has the potential of possibly not joining us at all. So if she comes, we shall welcome her. So Academic Senate community values. I want to remember or highlight one at least. I'll highlight number 3 for this week. Share my screen with you so you can all look at number 3. Acknowledge each other's experiences. All voices are valued. We will not devalue anyone for their experiences, lack of experiences, or differences in interpretation of those experiences. We value everyone's voice, and everyone has a valuable voice and a contribution to make. Zoom guidelines, other than during the public commenting times, non-senators and academic Senate members, voting or non-voting, are asked not to contribute to the meeting. Whether it's public comment or during a discussion time for senators, please use your virtual hand to indicate that you would like to be called upon, not your physical hand, because sometimes it's hard to see. Okay, so today all items will be taken in order as posted and distributed, so we won't take any items out of order, which brings me to item 3.1. Now, I've had several requests for public comment. One of them came from Dr. Art Olguin. He's going to be providing public comment before item 8.1. Another one came from Cindy Rogers, and I see Cindy's here with us. Cindy, it's your choice. Would you like to provide your public comment now or before an item that you would like to speak to, or actually both?
No, that both right now is perfect.
Great. All right, take it away, Cindy.
Okay, good afternoon. I promise to be quick today. I know that you're questioning that. I just wanted to thank the Senate for allowing me to speak at the last several meetings and to say that we at the campus store heard your concerns and are actively working on better communications with both instructors and students regarding inclusive access. And I may have misunderstood what was said, but I thought I heard at the last meeting, Rayanne say something when speaking about the required textbooks and how professors require students to purchase them regarding the campus store verifying textbooks. To clarify, the campus store does not verify textbooks. It's totally up to the professor on which textbook they use. If Rayanne informed the campus store she wanted to use a chemistry textbook written by Cindy Rogers, the only questions would be, do you have an ISBN and where is it published? The campus store does not make any judgments on the validity of the textbooks. We're frankly not qualified to do so. And in that same vein, several of our grants allow students to purchase required supplies with their grants. So if you as professors would like to require your students wear fuzzy bunny slippers to class, please let the campus store know so we can have them on hand and allow any student with an applicable grant to use their grants to purchase it. Thank you, and I'm done.
Thank you, Cindy. Really appreciate that, and really appreciate you providing information to all of us so that we can have an informed conversation. And when you joined us previously, Cindy, I know I followed up via email and thanked both you and Peter, and also I'm blanking, the woman from student.
Nicole.
Nicole, thank you. Sorry, Nicole. I know I thanked you via email, but I also haven't yet thanked you publicly for joining us for those conversations. And so you are always really helpful. So again, thank you, Cindy, and glad you could be here. Okay, so is there anyone that would like to give another public comment at this time? And if not now, then people can give a public comment before an agenda item. Okay. All right, I'm seeing none. Okay, so we will go back to today's agenda. I will go back to my screen sharing so that we can all look at where we are on the agenda. I'll share my Safari window. Okay, right on. All right, so posted and distributed were the meeting minutes of our regular Senate meetings from November 10th and the 17th, our 2 November meetings. Does anyone want to provide any suggested edits or revisions, or can we move forward by accepting them as posted and distributed? Counselor Jen.
Yes, there was one little, I don't remember, I'm sorry. Let me get it. For the, so sorry. I was ready and then I wasn't ready. There was just clarification regarding what I mentioned in a conversation about using the Zoom or camera usage. And I just wanted to clarify that it was for class planning that we require it, and it's not for academics or our counseling sessions. And I'm just trying to find it.
Oh, I think that was our November 17th meeting, maybe?
I'm looking at the 10th, sorry. Yeah, it was just a clarification. I just wanted to.
I think it's right here, perhaps, from, I think these are the 17th. Yep. And it seems as though I can't figure out what page this is on. So here's the paragraph.
Okay, yes.
So Senator Hamilton says that for counseling, they follow specific protocols.
Right. So I just wanted to clarify, it says during Zoom calls, but this was specifically for class planning and not academic counseling sessions that we require it. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
So, Chris, did you catch that?
I did.
Okay,
I'm making a note. I'll go ahead and update them.
cool. So we'll add
Thank
just,
you.
you know, a comment right here after including required cameras during our Zoom calls for academic planning. And that will be the edit.
Class planning. Mhm.
Oh, sorry, for class planning, and that will be the edit.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any other revisions or edits? Okay. So unless there are any objections, we will accept the meeting minutes from November 10th unedited and the meeting minutes from November 17th with this clarification included. Right on. Thumbs up, nodding heads, no objections. Cool, cool, cool. Love it. All right, President's report. So where do I begin? I purposely did not give a written report this week because there's not enough hours in the day. So a couple of things. Scheduling wise, next semester, I am unavailable to participate in the, we call it SEM, which is Strategic Enrollment Management Committee. The Academic Senate President, it serves on that committee in an ex officio role. And so I could potentially offer the SEM committee a substitute for me as my designee. However, Tara Carter is a co-chair and already on Academic Senate Steering as a liaison in many capacities and roles. And so she and I briefly discussed that she would keep me in the loop on SEM. And so I think thinking about people's times and commitments and all of that, that makes the most sense and is potentially expedient. And as we, move forward next semester, if Tara feels as though that communication channel in that way isn't enough, and there needs to be another faculty body at that table in that space, we can adjust at that time. Another committee that I also serve on in an ex officio role is PDAC. That's the Professional Development Committee. The biggest charge of that committee and the biggest, heaviest lift, I would say, is planning our in-services. While the PD in it is professional development, and professional development for faculty is one of the 10+1 areas. I also know that that faculty, while it discusses potentials for faculty inclusion in certain professional developments, that they're not necessarily the ones that design it, right? More of a scheduling and organizing and what do we want and what's the vision of in-service kind of committee. Tara also serves on that committee. And so again, we can discuss bringing in a designee for me on that committee. So if there's anybody out there willing and interested that has a passion around planning for our in-services, let me know. We can make that happen. Or again, that communication channel will happen between Tara and I at Senate Steering and also formally and informally as well. So my participation is coming to an end because those committees meet at a time when I am teaching in the classroom in the lecture hall next semester. Other things I want to share with you is I am meeting, I've met with the coach from the State Academic Senate now at least 3 times. We are scheduled to meet again before the holiday break. He looked over he's been watching our Senate agendas, and he and I have been discussing committee arrangements and things like that. And I'll share out a little bit more after we talk about our constitutional amendment voting later. But at this point, I think it might be a good time for early next semester for him to maybe meet with a subcommittee of interested faculty, not necessarily senators, but interested faculty in updating our bylaws, which is where our Senate subcommittees are codified, so that we can start thinking about how we're mixing up and changing our committees to make sure that they are efficient and working the way in which the Senate needs and things like that. I'd like to point out to the Senate that the Senate has endorsed the formation of several ad hoc committees over the last few years, and that's because we've had urgent matters that need to be addressed that really didn't fit well within our current committee structure. And I believe that's going to keep happening until we figure this Senate subcommittee structure out. So I really invite all of us to be innovative and approach that with an open mind as we engage in that process, because it can look different. And so not necessarily throwing out what we've been doing for the sake of throwing things out, but how can we do things better? How can we serve faculty and meet the 10+1 important areas and all of that? The other thing I want to share with you is the HyFlex conversations are moving forward. Kathy Scott is involved in them, as well as IT. The pilot project for very few select faculty will go forward next spring. So in conversations with Alan Hancock. Another kind of pilot project only for a select few right now is a curriculum audit. So 5 of us, I believe, are going to be taking an online course at LBCC, Long Beach Community College, to learn how they do their curriculum auditing. And so the 5 members are Matt Kay as chair of CAC, Tara Carter as the Senate liaison to CAC and the social sci rep there, myself as the academic senate president, let's see, Melinda Gadandara as a representative from ethnic studies and who contributed a lot to our DE agenda. And then Tara, I feel like I'm missing someone. Oh, Robert Brown. Is that the only other person? Okay, so Robert Brown as, director of the FRC. So the idea there is for us to learn from our colleagues at LBCC what they are doing and then bring those good things to our own curriculum. And so that's why we're using this very small group of people. And that's also why it's also a very small group of people because we're literally butting in on LBCC's party. So we're keeping it small for now with the intention of bringing that work back. So there's lots of work to do over the break. And one of them is program review was due yesterday. So senators, please check in with all the departments in your areas and make sure that they actually submitted program review, because at this time, the resource requests will be funneled to ITC for ranking, PNR for ranking. They'll be funneled to our controller and finances. And then that is a very strict timeline for both ITC and PNR because the recommendations come to both Senate and CPC. So they have only certain number of meeting dates in the spring, and then Senate has only a certain number and CPC has only a certain number, and you can appreciate how it's a very complicated puzzle and how we can't miss any of those dates so that we can get those resource requests, or at least some of them, funded by the end of the school year. Other than that, the pods that were assigned to every single program, and remember that this isn't just academic programs, it's also operational programs, student service programs, and academic support programs. Everyone did, quote, a big program review this year. And so the other time that will be spent over the break will be getting the PDFs and information from the program review out to the pods so that early next semester, those pod members can start going over them to give feedback to the programs that submitted them. The other thing that I want to share about PEC is they have a very heavy lift in the spring. Not only are we reviewing literally every single program review that came in through this pod subcommittee process, we also have to figure out what next year's program review looks like. So remember, this year it was completely and totally new process, new look, new questions, new everything. And so this year we've definitely worked out some of the kinks, but what are the questions we're going to ask through program review next year? What worked this year, what didn't, and all of that. So in addition to using the spring to go through the program reviews and have that shared governance process happen, PEC also has to figure out what next year is going to look like. So I'll say it again, I've said it via email, all campus, but I'll say it again. If there are interested and willing people out there that don't have campus service and you're looking for something, PEC could certainly use your help. PEC is a really motivated and highly engaged committee. And I'll also share that it's a committee where going through all of these different program reviews, you really get a holistic view of the campus and you really get to know how other departments think, tick, and work, and also gets to interact with other colleagues. So I think that's it for now. I'm sure I'm forgetting something incredibly important, and I'll think about it tonight when I'm trying to go to sleep. But the good news is, for that, we have another Senate meeting next week. So I'll make sure to have a written report for next week as well and share out any information there. Okay. So unless there's any clarifying questions for me, I'm going to move on to item 5.2, our Senate liaison report. So Senate liaisons, is there anything that you would like to share orally and highlight from your written report, or anything that wasn't included in the written report? Okay, I'm hearing none. It's all in the written report, I guess. That's awesome. Okay, coolness. Dr. Kathy Scott, item 5.3. Anything to share with us this afternoon?
I would like to say hello to everybody and say that I hope you had a nice break. I anticipate having a longer report at the next meeting because Ray is going to visit the Dean's meeting on Monday, and I've learned from past experience that I should talk to the Senate President before I blurt things out. How is that for being wise? So I did want to just make one comment about the Long Beach's cultural curriculum audit. They did accept the 5 Santa Barbara faculty, which I was very pleased to see. But I just want to comment that we are also learning from, they are also learning from us. So they have been very impressed with all the courses that we got accepted as ethnic studies for one, and the curriculum work that we're doing to really look at our course outlines of record. That's work that they're not doing to the same extent. So I think it's a really good way in which both institutions can learn from each other. So I will have a longer report next time, but we had a retreat. The President's Cabinet had a retreat yesterday for about 7 hours. So that's partly why I'm not really prepared to discuss those items until I've had a chance to share them with the deans and Ray on Monday. So I will look forward to talking to you at the next meeting, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. And item 5.4, our standing agenda item where anyone can contribute to getting items potentially agendized. Item 5.4 was not used this week, and so there are no requests for items to be agendized. Bringing us to our consent agenda. So we have one item on our consent agenda, which is the continuation of remote meetings for the Academic Senate, meaning for those of you that aren't familiar or aware or just forgot, the Brown Act requires in-person, face-to-face meetings, and remote meetings have it for a possibility or for even one member to be remote. There are very strict guidelines of that person has to be in public and the agenda has to be published there and all of those things. However, with COVID and the continued social distancing situation, Governor Newsom declared that some of those very strict Brown Act guidelines, law, actually, not guidelines, are being suspended. And in September, it was updated that for a body to continue, a Brown Act body, to continue to meeting remotely, every 30 days, they have to revisit the body voting on continuing to meet remotely for that to be legal. So I recommended in the early fall for the rest of the academic year, as we were all figuring out how to come back to campus and serve students and things like that, that we continue to have remote academic senate meetings throughout the school year, throughout the academic year. So here it is on the consent agenda. So the way our consent agenda works, if there is something people wanted to discuss, so there's only one item. So if senators want to discuss the continuation of remote meetings, I need a senator to ask to remove that item from our consent agenda, and then it will be placed at the bottom of our agenda. And if any senator doesn't feel that that's necessary, then I would love to entertain a motion to approve our consent agenda with this one single item.
I move to approve.
So Senator Carey moved to approve our consent agenda as published. Is there a second?
I'll
I'll
second.
second.
Oh, Trisha Matone, I saw her hand first, Jenny, so we'll go with Trisha seconding, but thank you for the support. Roll call vote. Benjamin Reyes,
Yes.
Counselor Jen,
Yes.
Ellen Carey,
Yes.
Jenny Baxton,
Yes.
Joy Coons,
Yes.
Dee Dee,
Yes.
Elizabeth Chisholm,
Yes.
Kathy O'Connor,
Yes.
Robin Gano,
Yes.
Jess Estrada is absent. And I did not get a proxy vote for him, and that's fine. Robbie Fisher,
Yes.
Ruth,
Yes.
Tara,
Yes.
Russell,
Yes.
Trisha,
Yes.
and did Anna join the meeting and I not see her? I don't believe so. Okay, so our consent agenda passes. Hold on one moment, please. Okay, sorry. All righty. The irony of being interrupted when we just passed a to continue meeting remotely. It's a joke. Right, item 7.1, COVID protocols for in-person classes and activities. So this came from our COVID, came from Vice President Joyce Coleman, special assistant to the president, who is overseeing our COVID protocols and activities. And so and the information is posted here. She wanted to make sure that faculty were aware of this, about how absences would be shared with them. The reason for this is she and I had a conversation about planning for the spring, and I shared with her some of the information, some of the things I learned from faculty, which included that faculty were concerned that some students may be using COVID as an excuse to be excused from class, and a concern that what some were seeing in the fall was when students were being excused from class activities, in person or online, the students would then be out for several weeks, and faculty weren't sure what that looked like and didn't necessarily want to question students, but were kind of questioning and what's going on and things like that. So Joyce wanted to make sure that faculty were aware of very clear, officially reporting absences. And also, if a student reports COVID to you, I have COVID, I'm very sick, blah, 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 that there is a process for them to follow, whether they are face-to-face or online, so that the instructor can be looped in and that the college can be looped in, and so that there is some official means of that reporting. So that item is just there as information to be shared out with the faculty in your divisions. Vice President Coleman is always interested in feedback and knowing things. So her email is listed there. If you click on that link, it will open up the app of your choice to email. So should you hear concerns of your faculty, please feel, please feel free to have them reach out to her directly there. I'm sorry, my brain's not working today. Okay, item 7.2, sharing out our Constitution results. Now, as you all know, our Constitution voting period ended before we went on vacation. There we go, went on vacation, went on holiday break. And I have the PDF to share with you now. I will upload it so that everybody has access to it on Board Docs. But before I upload it there, I have the PDF that I'm going to share my screen of, and I know that this is kind of torturous, but I need to slowly go through each amendment and let you all know if it passed or not. So let me share the results with you. Okay, so the reason why we have to do it this way, or the reason why I'm doing it this way, is actually getting the number of employees at this college accurate is very hard. So thank you, Dr. Kathy Scott, for taking my frantic request of helping me navigate the answer to how many full-time faculty do we actually have. So thank you to Lindsay Moss for helping her out and getting back to us so that we can do this literally a minute before today's meeting. So we have 205 full-time faculty members. And so remember, for a constitutional amendment to be valid, how do I say this so it's clear? That the majority of full-time tenure track faculty has to vote in favor of it. And Ellen's shaking her head. So I think I explained it carefully enough. So half of 205 is 102.5. Using traditional rounding rules, 102.5 rounds up to 103. So for an amendment to pass, we needed 103 votes of yes. So with those numbers in mind, we'll go through our amendments. Amendment 1, which is clarity, language, and grammatical updates, remove all gender references and replaces them with gender neutral language and change tenure track to full-time track throughout, failed by 10 votes. Amendment 2, the executive vice president for educational programs will not serve on the academic senate. This is consistent with the recommendations of our state academic senate and also the preference of the last 3 executive vice presidents. Also failed. Amendment 3, faculty association president or designee will serve on the academic senate as a voting member. Failed. So right now, the only representation that the faculty association has is through the liaison role, which is a non-voting role at the Senate. So that will remain that way. Amendment 4. An associated student government representative will serve on the academic senate as a non-voting resource member. This is our current practice and is not codified in the Constitution. So with 104 votes, that passed. So that's awesome. Strong support for students like that. Amendment 5, language was added to the vice president and president-elect only to be clear and consistent with a previous part of the Constitution. Also failed. And Amendment 6, EVP will not serve on Senate steering. Also consistent with a lot of recommendations from actual EVPs and the state academic senate. Also failed. Amendment 7, removing Robert's Rules of Order, which we really don't follow to a T anyways, also failed. And Amendment 8, edit to increase part-time faculty representation in the Senate, failed. Amendment 10 allows part-time faculty to vote in constitutional amendments, but not require a minimum number of part-time faculty voting, also failed. So the changes that will be implemented in our Constitution is the one that will bring our Constitution in line with current practice, which is including the associate student government representative, and no other changes to the Constitution will be made. I'm sure you can hear in my voice my disappointment. This is for a number of reasons. One, I would hope that clarity and grammatical issues in such an important document wasn't controversial or something, and that it would be approved. Also, it was Amendment 1, so it seems very easy that people could at least do that one, but you know, it is what it is. It's my opinion that it's kind of embarrassing that this document has existed for so long and we have grammatical and clarity issues throughout, but that's just me. I'm gonna let go of that. And also a little disappointing that the faculty body, well, I don't want to speculate, but it's also disappointing that there have been really sound recommendations given to our Senate for its membership, and that the faculty body did not take those recommendations. So that is not speculation, I can say that. Also disappointing in that this was a lot of hours by the Senate, a lot of important conversations, a lot of back and forth, a lot of information to be shared, and specifically for Ellen Carey and Vice President Ana Garcia, a lot of their time to try and get this out and have a faculty plenary and all of that. So it is disappointing, and it's a democratic process. And so that's how it goes sometimes, right? So letting go of that, but also acknowledging that a lot of work went into this. And I see Ellen's hand is up, so go ahead, Ellen.
Sorry, trying to find my unmute. Yeah, it is disappointing. And not to throw another wrinkle into this, but Anna and I received some questions during the voting process, and one of them had to do with the fact that the inclusion of an ASG rep was not in the original petition. So I just wanted to clarify whether we're allowed to make that change, given that it wasn't in the original petition.
You're absolutely 110% positive it wasn't in our original petition, because remember, there was a screw up by me early in the semester where I posted a petition and we didn't discuss it and move on it because we realized it was like the wrong version. And so we came back the second week. And
I'm looking at the one dated September 8th right now that has the correct timeline with the dates for this year.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, so, okay. I'm going to not declare something and cause chaos. And so what I'm about to say, I hope everyone can hear the worry or the uneasiness of it. But I think you cannot have a constitutional amendment about something that was not in the original petition. And so that part of the amendment may be invalid, which may mean that we didn't pass any of our amendments. But for right now, we're going to say that we did based on the numbers, and I am going to read the Constitution, which is really complicated and not clear and really needs to be updated to see if I'm wrong. Sound good, Ellen?
Sounds good. Yeah. And please, senators, just like talk to your faculty about caring about this. So next time we go through all this work, we can actually have more engagement in the vote.
Oh, there's not going to be a next time for a while. This is just so, wow. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Brown Act people, lawyers out there, if the Senate wants it, they get to vote and say, I'm just saying, like, I'm just saying I'm spent on this for a while. Trisha.
I'm sorry if you mentioned this in the beginning, but was the reason they didn't pass because not enough people voted, or did they actually the no's outweighed the yeses? Like, so is it apathy or people really did not want these? I'm sorry, the apathy, that's the wrong word. Were there people not voting or was it no's?
So I shared each one. I would argue that each and every amendment had of those voting, every single amendment had a super majority vote in favor of it. But not enough. So again, at least 50% of full-time tenure track faculty have to vote and in favor of it to pass. So every single one needed 103 yes votes.
But it's not like the no's outweighed the yeses necessarily. Okay, thanks.
Not even close. And
Close,
so I'm
okay.
and yeah, so again, a super majority was yes of those that voted. However, there weren't enough. So
Okay.
Again, we don't want to label things. And
Yeah, might be just, yeah, that's why I said scratch the apathy part. It was more, yeah, they just, for whatever reason, didn't vote on it.
Well,
Thanks.
and I'll share that, it may be apathy. That is my assumption, and it's an assumption. And the way our Constitution is written, by getting the majority yes votes, a non-vote could also be a no vote. Does that make sense? So like if you're not participating, then it's not a yes that counts towards the yeses that you need. So it might not be an apathy thing. It's that I don't want any of these and therefore I'm not voting yes. So yeah. Anywho, any last questions about the Constitution amendments? Okay, right on. Okay, I'll get that as an as a addendum. I'll be adding the PDF to our agenda today in like 2 seconds. Item 7.3, creation of Academic Freedom Ad Hoc Committee. So at our last meeting, the Academic Senate made a motion to approve the creation of an Academic Freedom Ad Hoc Committee of the Senate. The recommendation, the resolution included, no, it was just a recommendation. The recommendation said any interested faculty, part-time, full-time, credit, non-credit, can participate on a voluntary basis. Remember, the charge of this committee is to, using this cliche phrase, take a deep dive into best practices around academic freedom. Right now, academic freedom only exists in a board policy and therefore is owned by the board, whereas it should exist in an AP owned through the shared governance process, and specifically have the Senate at the lead of that, as academic freedom is owned and defined by and for faculty. Also, potentially create training materials for faculty members, what is and is not academic freedom. Also with I'll say the banning of critical race theory around the country. So remember that was included as part of the memo of saying this is why it's so important. Remember that we have a board member that is speaking against critical race theory. The board member is speaking against funding equitable pedagogy, professional development for faculty and things like that. And so we are at a place where this is very important. So training material for faculty, having a committee that can flesh out those conversations so that the faculty has a clear, united voice around what is and is not academic freedom for us. And then also perhaps creating, things like, in my mind, I'm envisioning a website and a paper so that it's a very clear stand of where SBCC faculty are at with this. So this is my first official call out for participation. I would like this committee to be, coming together over the holiday break, the winter break, not meeting at that time, but just, starting to get together and starting via email and saying when people can meet, when they can't, so that scheduling starts before the semester starts so that we can hit the ground running. So again, any interested and available and willing faculty, especially those that may have previous expertise and experience with academic freedom. So much information today. All right, so going back to the agenda, item 7.4, I'm going to kick it over to Tara. And for this item, I'm also going to add a couple documents that she wanted to share out about the ASCCC resolution voting. So Tara, I'm going to kick it over to you. Let me know, do you want to share your screen, Tara?
Yeah, can you give me a co-host?
Yeah, we sure can. Oh, I can't. Maybe Chris can. Chris, are you there? Chris may have stepped out for a second.
No, I just did it.
Okay, she's there. Okay.
Thank you, Chris, as always.
Okay. All right, Tara. So go ahead, and I'll add your items to the agenda item as well.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. So I had the honor and privilege of serving as your delegate at this fall's plenary. And I want to just highlight a few critical resolutions that were passed at the plenary that I think are really pertinent for our campus. You already have the full packet of resolutions, but it's a lot to read. So let me just give you a kind of digested version of them. The first item I want to bring to our attention is actually about what the future of plenaries will look like for the ASCCC. And then what the ASCCC decided to create a resolution on was whether or not they wanted to continue holding more hybrid plenaries. And the reason why is for all kinds of reasons that I think each of us have experienced due to the pandemic, that having a hybrid meeting or a hybrid plenary really allows for more folks to attend. And we certainly saw that with our Senate last spring when almost every senator was able to attend the plenary, and in the past that wouldn't have been the case. So for all kinds of concerns about equity and attendance, there was a lot of discussion too about environmental footprints and the cost of travel. So what the ASCCC decided to pass was this resolution for really making remote attendance an option in the future. I will say that during our area meeting, this was the one resolution everybody talked about a lot. And it brought up all kinds of conversations about the future of just Senate meetings in general, and whether or not colleges want to try to get the Brown Act to be amended to include more remote possibilities, since it is more equitable. We do get more attendance. The only downside to this is the cost. It is very, very expensive for the ASCCC to have this kind of hybrid, which is really a high flex option. But I will say that while there was a healthy attendance of folks in person, most people were Zooming in. So that is one thing just to kind of keep on your radar if you're thinking about attending a plenary in the future. Another resolution that I want to share with you all has to do with what Ray was just talking about with academic freedom. And it is a resolution in support of critical race theory. So I'm giving you a kind of summary of what all the resolves say. But here we can see that the ASCCC is in support of recognizing critical race theory as a accurate, long-standing model that researchers have been using for a very long time, as well as providing some training in what critical race theory is and what it isn't, as an attempt to stop disinformation about critical race theory, which there is a lot of right now. Of all of the resolutions, this one and the next one I'm about to share with you generated the most conversation, even though overwhelmingly this resolution passed. But there was a very small minority of folks who viewed critical race theory as too political and actually as a violation of academic freedom, which in reality, of course, it's the opposite of a violation of academic freedom. It's in support of academic freedom. And in our shared folder that Ray created for everybody, I've uploaded all of the PowerPoints. It was a very good general session on this very topic and explaining what critical race theory is and how it's about providing a broader, fuller picture of history, and as well as acknowledging how certain practices become institutional and systemic racism. So I direct you to that as well. Additionally, this is the other even more hotly contested resolution. It is a resolution that is in support of adding culturally responsive curriculum, equity mindedness, and anti-racism to our course outline of record. And so here I give you this kind of summary. It's really specifically targeted at making changes and amendments to Title V, Section 55002, which deals with our standards and criteria for courses. I am very happy to say that this resolution likewise overwhelmingly passed. At the same time, there was a very small vocal minority who likewise stated that what this resolution was essentially was violating academic freedom, violating free speech, and oh yes, allowing Big Brother or the government to tell you what you should and should not be including in your course materials. The vast majority of delegates, of course, saw this for what it is. It's a straw man. And that we all know that things like culturally responsive teaching it's an evidence-based approach that is targeted at student success. And I am incredibly pleased and proud to say that we at SBCC, we are engaged in this work already. You may have noticed in CAC that if you have a distance ed course, you have to include this in your course outline of record. I think this is an important resolution because it's not solely about providing training for how to diversify your curriculum or how to make your course practices both relevant and enriching for your students, how to dismantle anti-Blackness. It's important for all those issues, but adding it to the core allows that element of accountability that we've been lacking. So I'm very pleased to see that resolution passed. Another resolution that I thought was really in line with some ongoing conversations we've been having here at the Senate have to do with zero cost for textbooks. And so what this resolution is acknowledging is that, over the last couple of years, the Chancellor's Office has a program for a zero textbook cost degree program. And what this is essentially about is removing one of the barriers for students completing a program by making the course textbook free for them. We all know how expensive textbooks can be. The only problem that we are noticing, well, there are two problems actually. One is this program has been heavily subsidized with outside funding, and that's not sustainable. And the second problem is that some of the OER resources, they're not ADA compliant, right? So that's the Academic Disabilities Act. And sometimes they violate copyright. So these are, of course, are things we don't want to do. And so what this resolution was in support of doing was for all of the California community colleges to kind of pull their resources together and to create our own kind of open educational resource website for folks to use where it could be heavily vetted. If there are costs, it's a lot cheaper if we're all pitching in a little bit of money to pay for things like copyright. And so this might be a conversation that we'll have in the future at Senate. It's certainly one I know is on the minds for all of us here lately when we're talking about the high cost of textbooks. Another resolution to keep on the radar is about a guaranteed transfer pathway for the CSUs. And so what this resolution was about was, again, removing some of the barriers for students to transfer and really increasing our success rates for students who enter into our programs, but maybe they never quite finish our programs and they never transfer. So this is part of a larger program that the ASCCC has been involved in since 2017 about really looking at what our transfer curriculum models are. And I bring this to our attention because there's a lot of changes right now happening around this issue, particularly with the passing of AB 928. In our shared report from those of us who attended the plenary, I have a lot of information there. So I'll let you read it, but keep this on your radar, because right now you and your departments might be getting approached to offer more ADTs in your program. So keep that in mind. The last two I just want to share with you as well is letting us know that some of the challenges that we're having with COVID are things that are being felt and expressed over all of the California community colleges. And one is this idea about offering multiple modalities for students to really engage in your course as an equitable practice. And HyFlex is one of those things that we're all considering. The only problem is nobody's quite sure how to define HyFlex. What does it look like? And then what is it like for apportionment? Since we know like an online class is apportioned differently than a face-to-face class. So which is it if it's both? And so what this resolution is set forward in charge for the executive committee to look at is trying to come up with a definition and a set of guidelines for what constitutes HyFlex versus hybrid, as well as trying to secure potentially some funding for schools to apply to the chancellor's office to get. You can see here, it does require some equipment, even though it's not, it's not like Star Trek or something. It's not hugely fancy, but having multiple screens so that you could see a PowerPoint presentation and all of your students zooming in, et cetera, et cetera. So keep that on your mind as we try to figure out what HyFlex is. The last resolution I just want to share with you all is a resolution in support of really proactive COVID-19 protocols and strategies, including things like continuing to fund vaccinations and vaccination clinics. And the reason why, of course, is because while the CSUs and the UCs all have a blanket mandate for vaccines that come out of their respective offices, the California Community College System does not. It's a local decision. It's a decision made by boards of trustees. And a lot of folks are noting that even when they have a vaccine mandate, there's talk in their board of trustees of saying, well, we're all good now, so we can get rid of that mandate. We actually heard that at the last board of trustees in public comment for our campus. So I think it's important to acknowledge that the ASCCC is in support of continuing these very proactive and impactful sets of protocols. So we're not alone in that effort to keep everybody healthy and safe. That is all I have for you, but I'm happy to take any questions because I like myself to think of myself like a golden retriever with a head tilt. Questions? Thanks, everybody.
Tara, I just have thank you so much. We definitely put the right person in that job for sure this year. So thank you. I have a couple of follow-up items, not necessarily questions for you, but just a couple of things I want to share out with the Senate at this time. So HyFlex was discussed, and as Tara mentioned, there is conversation around what really is HyFlex. In the last State Academic Senate rostrum, which is their like semester magazine, there was an article that defined HyFlex as in-person teaching, synchronous remote teaching, and asynchronous teaching all in one class and not time because of that asynchronous versus synchronous component. And you might be thinking, well, of course, you can just record the lecture and then post it. But remember that that asynchronous curriculum piece is right now the language that's was previously used was substantive and what is it, Tara? Help me out here. The student contact and the student teacher contact. What is that?
Effective.
Effective.
Yeah.
So think about that for a second. How wild of a concept that is to have an in-person class where you have student, teacher, meaningful contact. Remote student, teacher contact, and it providing the same experience asynchronously and still having that. So that's really wild. And that's really like mind-blowing in a lot of ways. And so that's why we all have to like kind of like figure out and experiment and play with and figure out what works. The apportionment piece is a question for a lot of colleges, of course, you know. However, I don't want that to be a barrier for us to move forward with this at SBCC, and it shouldn't. Yes, there's different apportionments for face-to-face versus fully online courses and all of that, and that's true, but the chancellor's office is not there yet with this either. So they are not pushing this, they're not changing the apportionment, right? So that should not be the barrier of innovation at this point. Also, the curriculum piece shouldn't be the barrier at this point. Those are things that are going to be worked out in the procedure policy state level. Meanwhile, that's why we're piloting for the spring and starting these conversations with IT, starting these conversations with the FRC, working. That's why I've met several times with our faculty friends at Allen Hancock, because they are already doing something sort of like this and just trying to work it out now and just be very innovative at this stage. So more on this to come for sure, but you know, what is HyFlex today might not be where it lands. And the other thing I want to say is at SBCC, our distance education faculty support and development suggested that asynchronous is perhaps the most equity-minded and student-centered. And what I always find so interesting about these what is student-centered and equity-minded conversations is that you can have diametrically opposed views and both are saying that it's student-centered and equity-minded. So Allen Hancock, who is already doing this HyFlex model, by the way, has classrooms similar to what Tara showed in that picture set up already, and they are requiring their spring faculty to either teach, if they want to be like partially online or online, they're requiring them to use this HyFlex setup, or their distance education classes are synchronous. Allen Hancock does not allow asynchronous distance education classes. So it's very interesting how different colleges can think about what is student-centered and what is equity-minded and come out with different results, right? So I just wanted to share that. Roosevelt, do you, I'll get to the other plenary stuff. Did you have a clarifying question?
Yeah, I also teach part-time at Allen Hancock.
Uh-huh.
What you were saying is absolutely what they are not allowing us to teach asynchronous. It has to be at the date and time we're supposed to have met in person. However, because the internet being what it is, or students not having the equipment they need, even now, even though there's been loaners. So what I do is I record everything. If they're not able to get in because of whatever reason, then I just say, well, the recording, what we did today is up on the Canvas page. You can watch it, follow it, include it in your, I have them keep track of what they're doing. And they're good. So they're not stressing out, they're not panicking, and it makes it more equitable to the students, whatever they're going through with technology. But yeah, it is different how different schools are handling the same issue.
Yeah, thanks for that. And there was one more comment I wanted to make: remote attendance, racial justice critical. I can't remember what it is. So thanks again, Tara. Is there others that want to ask Tara for more information on any of the different topics she highlighted or mention anything else at this time? Okay. Oh, Robin?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks, Tara, for such a great presentation and such comprehensive information. It was fabulous.
Thank you, Robin. You know you just wanted that golden retriever picture. I'm always
Yeah.
good.
That's exactly right. Thanks a lot for that pick.
All right. Yeah, and yeah, you always do such good jobs with presentations, Tara. So thank you for that opportunity. Okay, which brings us on to our next item, item 7.5. So continuing on in the same vein of our ASCCC plenary feedback, we sent several members to the ASCCC meeting. Tara, of course, was one of them, Kathy O'Connor, Trisha Matone, Mariah Messer, and then also Rosabeth Dorfer. So they are all here with us, and they have provided some materials in our shared meeting folder. Tara already referenced that. I can put the link out there for you. And then also giving everybody a chance to give a brief oral report of the things they learned. Rosabeth, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Most importantly, I've never been to a plenary before. You guys are absolutely amazing. There's a lot of work that goes into this. I am just super impressed and just blown away at the dedication, the amount of work. I can't believe what you're all doing on behalf of all of us in the community college realm. Very grateful to all of your efforts. So a lot of it went over my head. There was a lot of voting, a lot of motions, and I was kind of lost. I came in midway. I didn't do the first day. I only picked one day. And it was a really hard decision which breakout session to go to. It's like I wanted to do them all, and that's not possible yet, to be in 3 places at once, maybe someday. I attended 2 breakout sessions that really resonated with me. One had to do with the plight of the part-time faculty, and one had to do with the academic senate and the union during the time of COVID and how they're handling things. And again, what came up in that session was that people still are getting the academic senate and the union mixed up. So a lot of times people will go to the academic senate when it should be something they should be going to their dean or to their union. So I think more clarification on that would be helpful to all parties involved, whoever they are and whatever their issue. The part-time faculty was pretty disturbing. What I heard is that issues that we're still dealing with today, there's some old timers who have been in the system for many, many years. And they said, because I've been with Santa Barbara City College since January 01. I was going to say 21, that's wrong. So I've been here for 20 years or so. And what was stated by one of the old time faculty is that what we're talking about now are the same topics that were brought up 20 years ago. So nothing has really, not much has really changed. And the concept of they're wanting us to present on behalf of our students, which I will always be there to help my students. That's my job as an instructor, and that's where my loyalties are, to my school and to my students. But they're asking us to put forth equitable for our students, equality and equity. Oh man, I'm like you, my brain's kind of fried. I've been online since 9 this morning, but yet the part-time instructors do not have that. So they're asking part-timers to do this on behalf of students, and part-timers themselves do not really have that equitable situation within their own workplace. So the concept of strike was brought up. I don't know where this is going to go, if it's going to go. I was super impressed to see what happened with the UC system, where the full-timers went to whomever they did to help their part-time instructors. But I do think that we need to look at what is happening with part-timers. It is quite a conundrum. yeah, so that's kind of all I got. There were lots and lots and lots of detail. I think someone recommended that someone else from another school write articles, start writing about, yes, equal but exploited. Part-timers are feeling exploited with having things put upon them that may or may not be, I guess, not be in their contract. And they go out of their way to hopefully help ensure that they have a job for the next semester. So there was a lot of kind of negative, it felt really bad. I love being a teacher, don't get me wrong, but there was a lot of many issues that were very disconcerting brought up in that meeting.
Thanks, Rosabeth. Yeah, of course. I think that higher education is at a reckoning with this inequitable part-time faculty structure that so much of colleges and universities depend on. So, yeah. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for attending. It was so great to have you attend, and you're absolutely right. Everyone should attend. And that's why a couple of years ago when I attended, I wanted to make sure that more and different people from the Senate get to go so that we all benefit from learning things and hearing things, because there is so many important conversations happening. Yeah. So thank you for that. Trisha, Kathy, anything to add, or Tara, anything from your breakout sessions, not just the resolution voting?
Well, I'll just say that I also went to just the one day, but it was very, very rich. And some of the sessions I went to, I feel like I've been to similar ones before, but I always get something new out of it. And so just real briefly, I did write more details about this, obviously, in the report, but at the one about the anti-racism, you know, one of the, it was a lot of reinforcing things we have learned, but also the concrete examples. And there was actually, like I wrote in my report about somebody who had actually experienced something that morning, an attendee, and it was just a very poignant moment. And just the use of language, you know, and that the idea that, you know, we say things like students on academic probation, you know, why we use criminalizing language to discuss somebody who's struggling for whatever reason, you know, the culture around that can change, you know, so even just the way we describe things that we've taken for granted, because that's the way we've always, you know, described that. Another one that I thought was interesting was the idea of, you know, transfer, removing the fog around transfer. And although it was talking mostly about preparing students to transfer from CC to the CSUs and the UCs, you know, being more, not just getting them in, but preparing them so they hit the ground running. But I was also thinking about, you know, from my point of view, I teach adult high school GED, and all of our students, almost all, I would say 90% of our students plan to go on to City College. And so we want to prepare them, not even just academically, you know, to be able to take the courses at CC, but I think all procedures and processes. And I have a couple, just as a side note, I have a couple of students who are going to the credit classes and also sometimes coming to my class for help. And I'm realizing that, you know, what are stumbling blocks, and, you know, the idea of office hours, and, you know, is that bugging the professor, or the idea of, you know, how does Canvas work, and all these other things. So I just think that there's things that are non-credit, especially in my area, that I can do. So that was really valuable, preparing our students for what to expect when they transfer. And then one final thing, because I think it might be interesting to people, was the idea of evaluating our textbooks to look for areas where they might be perpetuating or not acknowledging racial and gender stereotypes. And if you look in the report, there's actually a link to a framework that many colleges have been using to evaluate textbooks. And again, you know, some of it we're well aware of, and some of it might be kind of subtle. So I just thought that was interesting, and how the open access materials are often more culturally responsive because they're easy to change, you know. So if somebody goes in and goes like, yeah, that's really, you know, why did you have that stereotype in there? You know, you can change it. So I just thought it was also potentially interesting, though, I was thinking it'd be interesting activity for students to maybe evaluate, like, even if you don't change your textbook, you can at least acknowledge like, hey, you guys, what do you think about this page in your book? And have it, and maybe that could be a point in a science class or in a history class to say, hey, what do you guys think about the fact that, no women or people of color are mentioned until page 300 in your book, And so, I just thought there was a lot of interesting material, and that framework, again, there's a link to it, was in the report. So very valuable. Thanks for sponsoring this.
Yeah. So it's why it's the budget. No one, I mean, I appreciate the thanks, but we have the budget and this is what it's for. So let's use it, right? Let's make sure that you're all getting that really good user and experience. Kathy?
Okay, just briefly, my report actually didn't get linked onto the report. If you go to the folder though, on the ASCC fall plenary report, I have a link at the bottom of that page. I'm not gonna tell you about all this.
Your report is in there, Kathy. I know you said you weren't sure that it was, but I just checked. It was added November 29th. It's in there for the Senate to find.
So anyway, I did a very brief report that's in the folder on some of the sessions, and then I put 4 PowerPoint presentations in there that I thought were worth taking a look at. One on transfer, one all things ethnic studies, the general sessionist on abolitionist education, and then the last one is the OERI, inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism PowerPoint, which I thought was excellent. So I just put those 4 presentations in there that I thought would be valuable. They have very good definitions of different things that we've been dealing with on campus. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
Cool. Thank you. And Tara, anything to add or from the breakout sessions?
I think you all probably heard from me enough, but I will quote my friend and hero Ruth and say, read the report. Because I do provide a pretty detailed, I got carried away, so it's pretty detailed. But the one thing I will just highlight for you all is that the ASCCC is really, really disappointed that AB 928 was passed. And so if you want to know why, they fear that while the intention is good, the impact could be kind of something similar to AB 705, and we should keep it on our radar.
Well, Tara, can you, for those that don't remember that information item, can you please remind everyone what that piece of legislation is?
Yeah, sure. It's a piece of legislation that was written by Berman, who wanted to make transfer easier for students in the sense of knowing what courses they needed to take for their GE requirements to transfer. And right now, students have options. They can do our local pattern, they can do a CSU one, or they could do a UC. And so what this bill is proposing, that there be a single GE pattern for everybody. The problem is that does reduce some of the flexibility that students have. And because community colleges and the CSUs, we have to follow legislation, but the UCs do not. So the UCs can be recommended to work with the CSUs, and they can be recommended to work with the community colleges, but at the end of the day, it could all end up just looking like IGETC. And, lots of folks were worried about that because there are additional areas in the CSU one in particular that our students really find helpful, like, well-being and long-time enrichment, oral, like speech classes, for example, like none of that is in IGETC. And so folks from particularly like communication departments were freaking out about what that might imply. There was a general session where representatives from the CSUs and the UCs were there. And the general feeling from that meeting was that the UCs were being a little elitist about it. So while the intent to make things clearer and easier for students is great, the impact may not be so great. And so all of the executive committee had a meeting with Representative Berman, but didn't feel that he really took the time to listen to them.
And so if you remember, this was added as a information item, and Ruth included it as part of her legislative liaison report probably a month ago. And FAC, the state academic senate, the student associated student government at the state level opposed it, and several others. And I think what Tara is saying is kind of important in that it came from Berman, and that is a state council person, legislator, and not somebody with higher ed experience. So while I think that the intention was good, assuming what drove this was good and noble, the impact is going to be really troublesome. So more on that later, but yeah, thanks again, Tara, for highlighting that very specific piece. All right, any clarifying questions for anyone that attended? And if not, that's okay. We can move on in our agenda. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rosabeth, and thank you again for going. And thank you, Trisha and Tara and Kathy, and also Mariah Messer as well for attending the state plenary and representing us. Okay, we are now at item 8.1. I will share my screen with you all, addressing the incident of anti-Semitism. And I just want to make sure that we're still at quorum. I feel a lot of people are dropping off today's meeting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, we're still at quorum. Okay, good. All right, so Dr. Art Olguin actually requested to make a public comment before this item, and I am not seeing him at this time in the meeting. Is that correct? Does anyone see Art? Okay. All right, so then we will move on with our discussion of item 8.1. So as the Academic Senate President, when the incident of anti-Semitism by having a swastika be used on I think a piece of pottery in an art class, a non-credit art class, was shared out by our superintendent president. And then the way it was handled by having the instructor speak with the student and having the student remove the piece of pottery from the classroom. When that was shared out as let's say the result of that situation, some faculty contacted me and were very upset about that. And regardless of personal feelings around that, I think that it is exceptionally important for any leadership or body to respond to troubling incidences such as a swastika being used as a decorative piece or other disrupting incidences on campus in some way. So when we brought this to steering, steering felt strongly that the Senate should have a response in some way. What is that response? Often the work of the Academic Senate, either at the state level or locally, gets done through resolutions. And so this draft resolution was crafted. I want to highlight several things before we discuss this resolution. 1, resolution, procedure, policy, syllabi changes always ring very hollow, I feel, when there are troubling incidences on campus of varying content. And so I wasn't sure that the resolution was the way to go, only because when I've seen resolutions come up for the Senate, I've been very negative towards them. And even if I agreed in concept around them, it just felt very, I don't know, a very crappy way of acknowledging, you know, the hurt or the intimidation or the fear or the strong feelings about whatever was going on. And also, we're the academic senate, our purview is 10+1. We do our work through resolutions, so that just seems to be a place where it lands. So steering felt strongly we should have some response, and so here's the resolution for consideration. It is in no shape ready to go. This is a good time for editing and revision and sharing out, and how does this feel and how does this look, and how do people of Jewish descent, ancestry, religion, religious identity feel about this, right? The other thing I want to share with you all is that legally, there is not a whole lot that a college can do when there is an incident such as the one that we experienced, which is where a symbol of hate or even hate speech is used. So I am not a lawyer, but students have First Amendment rights even within our classroom. And the First Amendment protects symbols of hate even, and also there is protected speech. So as upsetting as this is, because it was on this person's work of art and their classroom work, there really wasn't a way forward that could have, that wouldn't have landed us in legal trouble. And I will share out a very specific article from the ACLU that explains hate speech and how it is protected, and hate symbols, and that while troubling and disturbing on so many levels, that it is protected speech. And so I know that that is very frustrating. So that's just some of the things I wanted to share. And then the other things that I wanted to share was included in the resolution is a commitment to have procedure and policy defining hate speech as a campus. We don't currently have procedure and policy around that. We have vague language around, you know, an ethics policy, right? But it's gray language at best. So maybe narrowing down on what hate speech is in a formal way would be helpful. Again, it rings howl, but it's one thing that we can do and endorse. And then the other is just having this conversation as a faculty body. How do we respond to such incidences? What do people on our campus need? Incidences like this, when they happen, don't affect just the person and the teacher and the students in the class. It affects the whole campus. And it especially impacts the people that identify with whatever group was targeted. In this case, clearly a swastika would be targeting Jews very overtly. And so I think not having this conversation come before the Senate would be remiss, especially because it happened in a classroom. So with that, I'll open it up. The other thing that I will share out with the Senate and attach to today's agenda is that the Southern Poverty Law Center has a 30-page PDF document for college campuses with recommendations on how to respond when a campus is purposely, let's say, like baited into something, when provocative people are invited to campus to speak, when hate groups want to come to campus and either share out their information, touch base with campus clubs, what have you. So I have that for us. This was a document I became familiar with in the spring of 2018 after Michael Shermer was invited to campus, and I had a very public all campus email where I spoke out against that, and there were allegations made that he was purposely invited to provoke the campus. And if that's the case, certainly I was caught hook, line, and sinker by that. And there is definitely documentation of further purposeful disruptions on our campus. So if you all remember the Black student demonstration at the Board of Trustees and the pledge, which got turned into the Pledge of Allegiance incident, there were 3 women, one of them being a former faculty member, Celeste Barber, who came to speak about the removal of the pledge from the board agenda. And there was a Montecito-based media company that used that event to promote their services, meaning that they worked with those 3, at least one of the members, and their claim to fame was that they got Celeste Barber and that incident on Fox News. So again, a purposeful event to provoke people. And again, that person just happened to be me that day. But I think that this is something that we need to figure out as a campus. I bring that document up because at the time that I learned about it, Patricia Stark was either the incoming or whatever, the outgoing, I can't remember, Senate president, and she put it in front of our superintendent president at the time, Anthony Beebe, and asked for us to get support and help and consulting on how do we respond to these incidences when they happen as a campus, and to get good advice and to maybe follow the Southern Poverty Law Center's advice. And since then, as far as I know, no committees have ever been formed, no administrative organization has happened around this. And so maybe with this incident, which is not, I'm not suggesting that this was an incident to provoke per se or disrupt, but I think there's a conversation to be had around this, and especially if it's happening in a classroom, I think that the Academic Senate should have that conversation. So I just said a whole lot. Maybe some of you are feeling certain ways about anything I've said. So I will turn it over to the senators at this point. And if there's nothing to be said by senators about the anti-Semitism resolution that's before us, we can either table the conversation or we can just move on from it and not do anything with it. Tara.
Yes, I want to just lend support for the resolution, and also for the Senate to have a real meaningful conversation about what we do when incidents like these happen on our campus. I think you're right that we don't really have clear policy on how to handle it, and we need to. This isn't going to go away on just by magically wishing it to go away. So I think this is an important conversation for Senate to try to figure out, or at least lend some recommendations for. I agree, creating a resolution or creating syllabi language can feel a little hollow. So maybe we can be innovative and come up with some more meaningful recommendations that feel to have more weight.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, yes to all of that. I did want to share that I did look for recommendations for college campuses or classrooms or whatever, clubs, what have you, when incidences like this happen. And one of the big recommendations, a lot of the feedback was it is protected speech, right? And so there's not a lot legally that you can do. But some of the suggestions didn't sit well with me, at least upon first reading, which was the instructor in the class should engage the person who did the offensive thing and turn it into a teachable moment. And that just, I mean, I get that, right? But it also just felt very Pollyanna, but that just might be who I am as a person and how I react to things, right? Clearly I'm a very like reactive individual. Also, I don't think that I am equipped to turn something like that happened on our campus recently into a teachable moment. That being said, I am the leader in the classroom. So if this were my classroom, how I react to it does set a tone, right? So yeah, I too am looking forward to thinking outside of the box and thinking how we should handle this and what faculty support we can get for when incidences like this happen. Robbie and then Ellen.
I agree with Tara that I would like us to make some policy or provide some leadership on this issue. And I just wanted to say that that idea that you just put forward to turn it into a teachable moment seems really sketchy to me, because you're doing that, to some extent, you're doing it at the expense of whoever the target in the classroom is. And I don't know that that person is going to be comfortable having a teachable moment, you know, around them.
The recommendation was a one-on-one teachable moment, not a public teachable moment. Like
Okay.
that you should be engaging with the person who did it. I also think that if the teacher is of that identity that was targeted, that is asking a lot of the teacher. But again, we're the leaders in the classroom. So, you know, there's a lot to explore here, right? I also think that a teachable moment is terrible. And yet, this was something that one of the a lot of sites said it, and a lot of places, how do you deal with anti-Semitism, like that were Jewish faith-based, were moving in this direction. So I'm not saying that that makes it automatically right. I'm just saying like it was surprising that this was the repeated thing that I got. And again, this just might be me, but it sounds like you're in the same camp as I am around this, Robbie. So Ellen, and then Counselor Jen.
I share some of the ideas and concerns that have already been expressed, including how resolutions in themselves can be hollow or seem hollow. But I do also think that it's really important for us as faculty leaders to define some of the issues we're dealing with here, like what constitutes hate speech, and to fill in those gaps where we don't have clear practices established for dealing with situations like this. This is something that I think many people on campus, faculty and staff, have been asking for in one way or another for years around many different incidents for some leadership on campus, not just faculty leaders, but the administration as leaders too. So I do think it's important for us to be involved in that process. So I'm thank you for bringing this here, and I think it's important for us to keep working on it and share it with our faculty.
Just to cite my sources, Ellen speaking reminded me. So one of the places that said turn a moment like this into a teachable moment was the Anti-Defamation League, which is an international Jewish organization. Even at that level, they're saying that is a good way to respond. And you know, perhaps it is, because I don't know, I guess there's something to be said for escalating situations, but clearly this isn't easy.
Can I actually say something I forgot to say that directly relates to that? I think you know, it's not always possible to know when the motivation behind events like this, but I do think we're seeing lots of instances in various places of free speech being weaponized in order, as you said, to provoke people so a lawsuit can be filed or whatever. And I think certainly in a situation like that, there's no, like, education is not going to be effective, like trying to make it a teachable moment, because that's not the point. But I think, and I don't know about this particular incident, but I think there are certainly some cases where there can be some teachable moments. So I think that's important for us to consider as a possibility as educators within sort of the other issues that have already been identified, like the what if the faculty member is the person being targeted or a member of the targeted group in the first place, and those kinds of things. But I wouldn't want to just abandon that wisdom of using it as an opportunity to educate someone when it's really coming from a place of misunderstanding or ignorance.
Counselor Jen?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I mean, we do have the standards of student conduct. And I'm curious, you know, within that, if I don't know if that's something that was reviewed, but I thought that they had just, there was a specific, that they needed to talk to the dean, or excuse me, I don't know who that is, but I thought that there was an actual process with maybe with an issue such as what happened or anything that happens on campus. So I'm not sure if I'm in error in thinking in noting that, but I just thought that was it. And I also do know that students do need to sign when they register for classes. They need to acknowledge a student conduct on and off campus as well. So I don't know if those are things that we just want to look at and review as well. I don't know if that's something that is the goal of this conversation, but I just wanted to bring that up.
So yeah, no, very good points. And I think that that's where a lot of people's heads went, right? So when they learned about it, when they thought about it. And so let me share this with you. I think if a student were disrupting a class and the instructor says, no matter the content of their speech, but it was disrupting the class, that could be a student conduct issue, and you could report it to the dean. I believe it goes to Associate Dean Chris Johnson. I don't think that you can hold a student responsible for the content of that because of this First Amendment rights thing. So like a lot of the reading I did was like, your First Amendment rights don't stop at the classroom door, right? So if it's protected speech, I don't think that we could have a student get in trouble that way. Again, I'm not a lawyer. The other thing is, there have been incidences of swastikas appearing on campuses and students being expelled or disciplined or even arrested, but it wasn't because of the swastika being used or another hateful symbol. It was because they were defacing public property or trespassing or something like that. So whenever it's protected speech, which again, this incident is, and the student put it on their own piece of art as they were working, I don't think that you could argue that's classroom disruption, right? And I don't think that it was like public defacement of property or trespassing, and that's why the school handled it the way they did, and that's why it's going this way. So it's not illegal to be a racist jerk and share as much. It's not protected speech to give specific threats based on identity. That's not protected speech, but unfortunately, this concept is protected. And again, I'm going to share out with the Senate and post it on our agenda, several links for people to dive into and read, because this really is like, this isn't unique to us. This has happened lots of colleges, lots of places, and it's a really difficult thing to deal with because of protected speech. Trisha?
I was going to say, so when Counselor Jen was saying, I was thinking the same thing about the student code of conduct, and I'm not sure about, disrupting the class, because I'm thinking of incidents that may have happened where another student said something that was really inappropriate to a fellow student, or was getting like too close to them and making them feel uncomfortable. And, we report it as a student of concern, and then the dean called that one student and talked to them about why their behavior was not appropriate. I know it's not the same thing, like kind of a clueless sexual harassment, if you want to call it that, versus, racism. But it wouldn't that be something where you're making another student, I mean, again, regardless of, there's a larger issue, obviously, but you're making the students in the class uncomfortable, could be like the, least of it in a way, but then it gets reported as a student to the student of concern if the instructor doesn't feel equipped to deal with it at that moment. So I mean, maybe there is a channel to deal with this. Maybe it's not explicit or it needs to be refined. But I had similar thoughts to what Counselor Jen had.
I mean, I think the reason why we think that is because we live, perhaps we're fair and just people, and we think, how can something like this just go like this, right? But
it's
like
not right. It is disrupting the class, because if that's when we look at it, because the student, the racist, sexist, whatever, it's not what you want anywhere, but especially in your classroom. So you report it because it's violating student code of conduct.
So
I don't see how that falls outside of that.
So I think that the issue with this particular problem, which could be addressed with other problems as well, like the nuance in this, is the student was addressed and it was identified, and the student removed the offending piece of pottery. I think for them to have this fall under that umbrella, it would have to be repeated and directed. So like, I think. So like, if you say something racist and somebody says that was racist, knock it off, I don't think that violates the student code of conduct. If you keep doing it, that violates the student code of conduct. Which was,
I think it depends on what it was, like,
it literally doesn't.
Things jump right to, like, that's not acceptable at all, get out of here, versus like that, what you just said.
So this is what I'm trying to explain. Students have a First Amendment right. So the flip side of this is if you have a student that's like protesting something, right? And people don't like it. Can you throw them out of the class? No, you cannot, right? So if they're saying something harmful or offensive, can you throw them out of the class? From what I read, and I'm not a legal expert, you can't and you shouldn't, which is potentially why the college handled this the way they did, which is why people are really mad and upset. So assuming our colleagues and administrators went through every possible thing that they did, our student conduct, our procedures and policies, and thought about what could or could not happen, and called our attorneys and called other attorneys and got good sound advice and moved forward with that, what can we do as a Senate? What is in our area of purview? Do we want to put forward this resolution? Do we want to work on a hate speech policy? How do we want to provide faculty professional development around how do you handle incidences like this in the classroom? What is the will of the Senate? Ellen?
I was just going to point out that in the Student Code of Conduct, it's section W that addresses this. So I'm not going to read it, but if people want to go and find that.
So what does it say that can happen?
It says, it's listing the things that are conduct that's not okay. and
so can you list them? List them.
What's that? Sorry. Okay, it says engaging in speech or other expression intended to insult or use fighting words or nonverbal symbols directed at an individual's age, sex, race, color, disability, religion, sexual orientation, or national/ethnic origin, which is obscene, libelous, or slanderous, or which by their very utterance or expression are likely to incite a violent reaction as to create a clear and present danger of the commission of unlawful acts on college premises or the violation of lawful district's administrative procedures or the substantial disruption of the orderly operation of the district.
Okay, so something I heard you say, which is really important, is this concept of fighting words. And the Supreme Court ruled that a swastika in it of itself is not fighting words. So in our code of conduct, we have this, and this person put a swastika on a piece of art, and it was on their art, supposedly not directed at anyone. And the Supreme Court says this doesn't constitute fighting words. So what do we do about this? That's what I'm asking. So right, our student code of conduct does not handle this. And that Supreme Court ruling was in 1977, by the way. Counselor Jen?
Sorry, my dogs are going crazy right now. I would like to see some professional development for faculty on this in at a future date. I think that while we are speaking about a swastika currently, this is not going to be the end of anything for times in the future, for now and in the future. So I do think it would be something for us to have dialogue about that within the classrooms and from in other parts of campus. So yes, I do like that we would have that. I think that I personally would like to read up on what you're saying. I didn't know any of that regarding the Supreme Court and all of that. I mean, I would like to do some more inquiry research on that. So.
Yeah, like I said, I'll update the agenda and share this all out with the Senate so that you have these resources. I'll even share out the Anti-Defamation League's suggestions on how to deal with anti-Semitism, which includes turning it into a teachable moment. They also recommend not going after free speech, which I'm not saying we are. So I guess my question to the Senate is, I'm hearing a support for professional development around this. Is that led by the Senate? Is that created by an ad hoc committee? Who is going to do that work to provide the faculty with resources on how to deal with this? Do we delegate it to a subcommittee? What does that look like?
Could we do it through the in-service, what you were talking about in the beginning of our meeting today? I don't know what committee that was.
So that's PDAC, but it still needs to be a point person to develop that content. So PDAC just schedules in-service, and PDAC puts a call out for in-service activities. But it still would need somebody that was motivated, interested, willing to engage in this work, and have some legal wherewithal so that the advice that is being dispensed it would not get a faculty member in trouble. And that's why I keep saying I am not a lawyer. And yet I was reading Supreme Court cases from 1977 to try and figure this out. Jenny?
That's exactly what I was going to say is, I don't know how faculty led this can be, or it could be maybe faculty led in conjunction with managers or, Michael Shanahan or something, because hearing what Ellen read in the student conduct, I would interpret that personally, and maybe by my desire, that would prevent a swastika being on pottery. I'm not sure I would have the expertise to interpret it, for legal sake. And so we might have to think about like a recommendation of what we want to see on, but it might be above strictly faculty to solely lead and have all the right guidance on this.
Totally.
And also in the resolution, there are a couple things in the resolution that can call for different actions and groups that need to do the work. The call about, I'm looking at it, sorry, language on syllabi and the works that are created. That also is going to take consultation, but should be faculty led. And there's also the issue of these issues come up perhaps at non-credit with respect to art. And so those are maybe faculty that aren't always part of professional development opportunities. And so we need to loop them in a different way as well.
Yeah, agreed. I thought the same thing, Jenny, when I learned about fighting words, when I learned that phrase through my own reading, I thought to myself, for sure a swastika is nonverbal fighting words. Like if I draw a swastika in front of somebody, like I should fully expect it to be punched in the face, like quite literally, like literally fighting words, right? And so when I read that the Supreme Court said that in it of itself, it's not, and the swastika was the example for that case, that was really, yeah, that was something I wanted to mention to the Senate. Anyways, Robin and then Trisha, and then we'll need to end the meeting here, and we'll come back next week and maybe finish up some of this work and the other items on our agenda.
I agree. I'm just want to give a big sigh here over the whole topic. I agree with Jenny that having it be professional development, as we've seen with many types of professional development, is pretty limiting, yes, in terms of non-credit faculty who don't always get the option to participate or the opportunity, but also just in terms of who chooses to participate in this type of PD and who doesn't. And it's pretty consistent across our campus. I'd also say that another thing that's pretty consistent, I think Ellen mentioned before, we'd like some leadership, and we've been asking for leadership. We've had so many different leaders on our campus and so many different incidents that we've had a lot of opportunity to see what we might call a variety of responses, except they're all pretty similar and all similarly ineffectual. And if we look across the country, we're also seeing that response to this type of incident is ineffectuality is a common thing in dealing with these types of incidences, partially because of the legal ramifications and free speech and all of those things. So I'm wondering if there's, I know, Ray, you already did a bunch of research, but I'm wondering if there are places that are trying to handle this in different ways in terms of community organizing and pulling people in to show support in a very public way. I mean, COVID has complicated things because we're not on campus, but you know, things like vigils and public shows of support and things like that. And I don't know how effective those things are in stopping the behavior, but I do know in terms of cultural, the way culture works, that cultural stigma is a very powerful statement and a very powerful motivator of behavior. None of those are like instant fixes. I'm in support of a resolution, even though I understand the limits of a resolution, but it always just feels like doing nothing is a mess too. I don't think this can be faculty driven. But I also don't think it can be administration driven because of administrators seem to be even more limited in their ability or will to act. So I don't have any solutions. The problem is ongoing on our campus. This is not, I mean, we saw it starting how many years ago with overt racist messages being put across campus and being shouted at students, and, you know, anti-LGBTQ, everything types of issues on campus. We have issues, and this is going to keep going. And sorry, depressing.
Well, yeah, yeah. And it's nothing new either, right? So. Okay, so we are now at 5:05. So it's my opinion that we need to adjourn. We have one more meeting together left in the semester. I know this is asking a lot, but I would ask that senators put this resolution in front of their faculty for feedback, and to the best of your ability, explain that this feels hollow, and the conversation that we had here today, and try and distill that and synthesize something to bring back and have actionable parts of this resolution to potentially pass at our next meeting. And that is going to be really hard work, because this is never easy, and also even asking for a conversation around this can invite extremely insensitive comments. So also protecting yourself mentally and emotionally around that. But I do think that this is an important work of the Senate in that we are campus and faculty leadership. We did not get to item 8.2, which is inclusive access and class materials. There is also a resolution, a very drafty resolution attached to that item 8.2 that I want you to put in front of your faculty. We did not get to discuss it today. It can be highly problematic. It can be absolutely terrible. It can be full of lots of things that aren't going to work. And that's okay. It is the starting point. And so I'm asking you to put it in front of your faculty for feedback, to come back at our next meeting to update it some. And it's my recommendation to the Senate that we not move on that until after the winter break anyways. So it's just the opportunity to put that in front of your faculty now. So those are your two homework assignments between now and next week, which is asking a whole bunch because it's week 15 and finals are next week and we're all exhausted anyways, but please do your best so that faculty input is included. Other than that, I'm going to send out many of the links that I shared. Please, you know, the cliche of quote, the trigger warning, use that. Many of the articles talk about very upsetting incidences, may include upsetting images, the swastika themselves. Several of the, you know, articles include that to explain what it is and things like that. So you'll get that and it will be attached to our agenda, and we'll adjourn now and we will reconvene next week. So until then, have a great night, everyone. Oh, wait, one thing. Acknowledging it that it's Hanukkah now, as we're discussing that. I should have started with that and I forgot. So acknowledging that. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, Ray.